Welcome back again to Inside Report. I'm Bill Marshall, a senior investigator with Judicial Watch, and I have the real honor and privilege of having what I consider to be a national treasure as a guest today, one of the finest investigative reporters in Washington today. I have Luke Rosiak with me on the program with Daily Caller News Foundation. And Luke, welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me, Bill. It's great to be with you.
You know, you've done stunning work, and I got to show our audience your book, Obstruction of Justice, How the Deep State Risked National Security to Protect the Democrats. I mean, it is a tour de force of investigative journalism, and you don't see that anymore today. I mean, you know, the Washington Post, the New York Times, they're all about covering up now, it seems, the scandals that, particularly the scandals that engulf the Democrats, which this scandal certainly did, that you've so meticulously documented in this book. And you know, I got to say that you know, I've been doing investigations for a number of decades now, and I so appreciate the you know, the gumshoe work. I mean, you actually literally you use many of the same techniques that I did, even going back in the day when I was doing, you know, background investigations on people and so forth for corporations and law firms and whatnot. You know, even going so far at one point to do a trash poll on your suspect, your main suspect. So let's sort of set this up for our audience a little bit. If you could give us sort of a little synopsis of the Awan family and their role in the corruption and venality involving the Democratic caucus in the House of Representatives.
The Awan family is Debbie Wasserman Schultz's IT guy, Imran Awan, who was a guy in his 30s from Pakistan, who basically was this sweet-talking con man that, you know, manipulated his way into Congress and then expanded throughout until he had gotten them to put all of his relatives on the payroll, you know, $1 million a year, taking in $7 million over a decade, with all these assorted relatives, many of whom weren't even showing up for work. And they began stealing computers and working with, you know, chiefs of staff and things like that on a procurement scam in the House of Representatives. And where things went wrong is the same week that the DNC was hacked, the House Inspector General caught Imran Awan hacking Congress as well, and actually hacking the DNC's sister group, the House Democratic Caucus. And so what you have is this story that's everything that the Russia thing was supposed to be. It's foreign meddling, collusion, hacking, cover-up, except for this was actually real. And, you know, over the last 2 years, we see the Russia thing fall apart and just kind of is revealed as a fabrication. Meanwhile, this was met with a very different reaction by the FBI and the media. It was a thing that actually did happen, and they kind of, using these same techniques, they concealed it in a pretty dramatic way. And so what we're talking about when we're talking about Imran Awan is essentially what happens when a blackmailer assumes one of the most trusted roles in Congress as the IT guy who has all of their data. And you almost think back to the Jeffrey Epstein situation that's coming out now. When you are up to no good with some powerful people and then you kind of escalate and do something real bad, well, who's going to bring you down? Because you got the goods on a whole lot of other people. You know a lot of powerful people. And what we see then is the FBI basically doing the bidding of Nancy Pelosi and the police. They lose evidence. They threaten witnesses. Some really shocking things happen. And, you know, I wrote this book and people are like, what? I've never heard of this thing, or it's not kind of the main scandal that you hear about. And sometimes people are like, that makes the book kind of random. I don't see it that way at all. The whole point is that this is about cover-up. And so when you're talking about a scandal that you may not have heard about a lot in the New York Times or the Washington Post, that's kind of the point. You know, we've heard a lot about all these other scandals, but this one was, you know, as Newt Gingrich writes in the foreword, probably the biggest scandal in the history of the House of Representatives. And the reason we didn't hear about it was precisely because of truly third world corruption by the FBI and others. And to me, that's what's so interesting. So even if you've never heard about this book, or if you just kind of heard a little bit about Imran Awan, the IT guy from Wasserman Schultz from Pakistan, when you read this book, it's like a spy thriller, and you realize, my God, if this is true and I never heard about any of this, like what else is going on that we're not hearing about?
That's exactly, I was just going to use that phrase myself. This thing is written for Hollywood. I mean, Hollywood could not make up a screenplay that will do justice to your book. I mean, not only have you laid out the facts so meticulously and cogently, but you use a lot of language that gives it sort of a feel of a spy thriller. It's so good, and I don't know if you're going to get movie rights on this thing. You should. If there were any justice in the world, some studio would be picking this thing up and turning it into a movie, because they, as I say, you couldn't make this stuff up. It's like this is like the Pakistani version of The Sopranos. This family. I mean, there's the venality and the criminality is so broad, so expansive. I don't understand how Imran Awan was able to keep track of everything, of all this corruption that he had his hands in. I mean, it was. I mean, you had, if you could go into it a little bit, you had in addition. Okay, so let's step back. He comes over here, 1997, as a Pakistani immigrant, right? Mm-hmm. He goes to Johns Hopkins. He's a very. I will give this to him. He's a very industrious guy. I mean, this is a guy who's always hustling. Mm-hmm. And on that aspect of him, I kind of appreciate, because I'm a hard worker too, as you are. But the problem is he didn't appear to devote his life to legitimate pursuits. We'll put it that way. I think he could have accomplished great things had he been on the right path. But anyway, so he comes over here in '97. He gets his degree from Johns Hopkins, and he inserts himself into Congress by going to work for Robert Wexler, congressman from Florida, right, in 2004. That's his first foot in the door. He becomes his IT guy. I guess Imran had been working for like an IT contractor or something initially, and then he convinces Wexler to hire him as his personal IT administrator or something, right? And then he marries this woman named Hina Alvi. After Imran gets his citizenship, he marries this woman, Hina Alvi, which I guess gets her citizenship, right? Oh, he comes over here, by the way, on the diversity visa lottery system, right? Which a lot of people have a problem with, this whole diversity visa thing. So he marries this woman, Hina Alvi, and then he gets her a job as an IT administrator for Congress, right? Did she have any IT background at all, Hina Alvi?
No, not at all. It was her cousin. It was his cousin, and he married his first cousin as a way to bring her over, and then he had another wife that was, so this is a guy that, and to back up a little further, before he did the IT stuff, when he came over to Virginia, he worked as a faith healer, which was a fraud. He used a fake last name that was supposed to be like, you're one of the elite, kind of holy caste.
Haji Shah, right.
Yeah, and it was all made up. And so people died because they were like these super Pakistani immigrants that were like, he told them, if you give me 20 grand, I'll cure your cancer. And so they died. And so it goes to show that this is a guy that, number one, has a lot of charm. Number two, is extremely ruthless. Like he would rather have you die if he can get, a few pennies.
Right. And he learned all this, if I'm not mistaken, at the feet of his father, right? Well, his father, Muhammad Awan, was a Pakistani janitor turned con artist. And then he was ripping people off in Pakistan by writing bogus checks to buy their land. He would take possession of the land, then the checks would bounce. And then I guess he would pay off corrupt cops to not enforce court orders relating to
right, and that was all Imran Awan using his dad as a proxy, because he figured if the FBI looked into his money, maybe they wouldn't check his dad's money abroad. And another thing that they did is they set up these fake travel agencies that sold really cheap tickets to Mecca for Muslims that wanted to do the trip to the lifetime trip. And it was fake. They would just stole their money, and they sent them a letter saying, well, guess what? Allah doesn't want you to go to Mecca, but Allah told me no refunds. So these are sick people that later on.
Right. Well, one of his former associates, who I think you interviewed in prison, or you wrote to him in prison, right? Mm-hmm. Rashid Mina, I think was his name, I believe. Mm-hmm. Right. He was convicted of something or other, and even he calls them. He was defrauded by them. I mean, this is this is when you can't trust, when the crooks can't trust the crooks. So you know they're really, really bad. And I think the phrase he used, something like they rob you with their tongues or something. Apparently Imran and I guess his brothers Abid, right, and Jamal were very, very smooth talking people. At least certainly Imran was in any event, right? So he's bringing in all these family members, not just the immediate family members, I guess Abid Awan and Jamal Awan, but he's bringing in other people like Rao Abbas to be like these no-show employees in Congress who are supposedly doing IT work, but they're not actually there. I think you say at one point in the book, I think it's Abid who show his face for a couple hours, a couple of days a week, at the Rayburn House office building, so people would think he was working. But then he would go off and do something else. Was he working at the car dealership at the same time that he was supposed to be in Congress? Was that?
Yeah, and I mean the car dealership was pretty much fake too. They had stock images of models and stuff down on their website purporting to be their employees. They had no inventory, and what the car dealership did is launder money from Hezbollah. And so I went down to the Fairfax County, Virginia courthouse, and these guys have been in all kinds of lawsuits over the years where they've been accused of fraud and things like that, and sure enough, their Pakistani business partner in the purported car dealership testifies under oath that this thing was a money laundering entity that didn't really have any cars, and they got money from this, Iranian minister. And then they say, well, why can he testify at this hearing? Oh, he can't. He's busy running the government in Iraq, but he's of Iranian descent. And so it turns out that this is a guy who truly is an Iraqi government minister who's been tied to Hezbollah by the CIA. And the irony is they named the car dealership CIA.
Was that some kind of perverse joke on the American government that they're naming this Hezbollah connected car dealership after our CIA? I mean, I found that just a perfect sort of irony, if you will. Where they are just so screwing over the American people and the American government through all the chicanery with their so-called IT services that they're providing Congress. Well, let's move into that. I mean, this is just staggering to me. You had 44 members of the Democratic caucus of the House of Representatives sitting on some very sensitive committees, right? Intelligence and what have you, who have turned over the keys to the kingdom to these fraudsters, and they didn't do any background checks on these guys. I couldn't believe that. As I said earlier, I used to do background checks for corporations, law firms, and due diligence, and for people that are have their hands in much less sensitive information than these guys did. And yet I would think that would violate, and I think you make the point in the book, that violated House rules, right? That they didn't do background checks on these. It
did. I mean, they had all these rules and policies, and one of them was you got to do background checks for the IT guys. And then they just didn't implement or enforce any of the policies. And it's really, at the end of the book, they have this little hearing where they're all patting each other on the back. Oh, we're going to reform some policies to make sure this never happens again. The policies weren't the problem. You had a sociopathic blackmailer in Congress. There's already policies against that. The problem is you weren't doing basic due diligence. You weren't enforcing the rules. It's all on paper. So, you realize by the end of this book how the House of Representatives is exceedingly vulnerable to this kind of thing, because they have the whole place set up to protect the reputation of the incumbent members of Congress. They don't want there to be a scandal to come out. Even if the members of Congress are being victimized by people, it's easier for it to go away than for these members to be in the news for all the wrong reasons, and then for the party in charge, in this case the Republicans, to be exposed for not enforcing basic rules. And so that's kind of the odd thing about this book, is that Paul Ryan made enormous failings in enforcing the House's rules, and the Democrats very quickly identified that as, hey, if we're going to look bad on this, well, you are too. So maybe we both kind of need to align our interests here and just kind of pretend this all didn't happen, because it really was probably the worst scandal in congressional history.
Yeah, I mean, you quote Debbie Wasserman Schultz in there saying, in effect, how dare you, not teach me that I'm not supposed to use Dropbox when, I think it was the chief administration officer, was it Phil Kiko? Mm-hmm. And she says, she's suddenly the victim where because she's an idiot, or she's pretending to be. I don't think she was. I think she knew her system was compromised, but then she somehow tries to turn it on the Republicans as if they're at fault for her, criminality or venality in the way she allowed her IT system to be abused. Now, these people had access to the files of these congressmen, 44 congressmen, and four of the 5 past chairs, as I recall, of the Democratic House caucus, right? 4 of the 5 chairs of the Congressional Black Caucus, 2 of the most recent chairs of the Congressional Hispanic Caucus. All of them were using these crooks who were taking their data and shipping it off to parts unknown, possibly to Pakistani intelligence. You allude in the book at one point to a thumb drive being passed to a vignette. If you could recount that for me, this story about a thumb drive being passed to, I think it was the Pakistani Interior Minister.
Right, and so when I heard about Imran Awan, I did a basic Google search on him, and a news article from 2009 came up that said that basically he had this unexplained tremendous political power in Pakistan, where he had led people to believe that he worked for the White House, and he had people thrown in jail who crossed him in Pakistan, and he had basically this entourage of Pakistani intelligence agents following him and doing whatever he wanted. He was just this VIP, and we know over here he's supposed to be just the guy that plugs in your mouse. He's a nobody. So how did he convert this job involving all this access to data into such tremendous power over in Pakistan? And one of the people that was named in this story was the business partner who was in jail for the scam about making the fake travel agencies. And so he immediately said, how do you think he had all those intelligence agents helping him in Pakistan and escorting him and, giving him protection? He was given USBs of data to the Pakistani Interior Minister. And so, it's hard to say, how do you prove something like that? I don't know. But what we can say for sure, because I sent a guy over to Pakistan, I was working with a great journalist who was over there, and, he confirmed with everyone in town that Imran Awan did travel with Pakistani intelligence services giving him protection, like guys with machine guns, escorting him in motorcades. And so, to me, how do you get that kind of protection from that country?
That was an hilarious sort of aside in your book. You're saying how the Pakistani media loved your stuff, and they were I guess repeating it, rebroadcasting it, what have you, and that the mainstream media here, you had tepid reporting by, I guess, the Washington Post and New York Times, whose reporting seemed more like an effort to minimize the gravity of this scandal, which, as I say, was huge. I think this is probably the biggest scandal in Washington for the past 20 years, putting aside Hillary's thing, putting aside the whole the fake counterintelligence investigation the FBI launched against the Trump campaign. And that's saying something. I mean, because this is a town rife with scandals, of course. I just found it incredible that our media, our mainstream media, tried to ignore your story, which and you were just relentless. I mean, I remember as you were reporting all this all along, I was following it, and then, thankfully you've put it into a nice, easily digestible, wonderful book. Again, Obstruction of Justice: How the Deep State Risked National Security to Protect the Democrats. So good, and boy, I couldn't recommend it highly enough. So where do things stand now? We know that Imran, he got an incredibly minor conviction, essentially for lying, right, as to the purpose of a loan. I think he was taken out from a federal credit union for like $300,000, which he initially claimed was for a funeral for his father, the janitor turned con man back in Pakistan. I mean, I would think in Pakistan the $300,000 could pay for a head of state funeral and then some. But then he changed the story, I guess, and he claimed it was actually wait, when the bank employee sensibly questioned a $300,000 funeral, he said, oh no, I meant to say it was for like a home renovation or something. And then she said, well, okay.
And then later on, he changed it to the reason I stole money from the U.S. was to build a hospital in Pakistan because I'm a charity magnate.
I,
And the funny
I,
thing is, you can submit FOIAs to law enforcement agencies and receive back records showing that he was holding 5 different women in prison and threatening their lives.
well, this
And
is yeah. This I gotta touch it. I could have you on for 3 hours. This is just this story has so many avenues and wrinkles, and it's just an amazing story. But Debbie Wasserman Schultz tried to claim. Well, first of all, when you were when Phil Kiko, for example, and some other people, and yourself most prominently were raising issues, questions about about the Imran Awan family clan. She was saying, "Oh, you're Islamophobic," and in fact, I think you have a little story in there about how she put her finger on, I think it was Phil Kiko's chest, and said, "You're an effing Islamophobe." I mean, and then at some point she said it was like a misogynist thing, going after Imran, and I'm like, wait a minute. You point out very clearly in the book, this guy, there were 5 police reports filed against him by women for abusing women. 3 restraining orders were filed and 2 lawsuits. I mean, this guy's a picture of the Harvey Weinstein, Me Too problem, if you will. And somehow Debbie Wasserman Schultz cast him as the victim. I'm stunned. I was stunned by that.
yeah, it really is identity politics gone amok. I mean, his wife was one of my sources. The stepmom was one of my sources. Both women were threatened with death if they went to the FBI. And obviously devout Muslim women. My sources were Democrats who were deeply concerned with what was going on, and they couldn't understand why their bosses were protecting these people. And so from the inside, the more you know about it, it seems so cynical and so absurd for them to say, oh, it's anti-Muslim, it's anti-Democrat, it's anti-women. It's preposterous, it's demeaning, and it's just so craven that they would say these things, and knowing full well that it's not true. But that's the day and age we live in, I guess, where it's just if you can deflect so that people don't look into it. Because if you just accept that and you're like, I got other things going on in the world, I'm not going to look into it. But anyone who took more than a few minutes to look into the Imran Awan situation saw, oh my God, the things that I heard in the Washington Post are not true. This is all documented. And I was so glad to write a book because it shows very clearly in the book, the book doesn't engage in sort of like speculation or anonymous sources. Everything in the book is super clear and really indisputable. And when you read it, you're like, oh my God. I mean, I was misled about this. This is so clear cut. And when he hacked the House Democratic Caucus server, the FBI went to seize it as evidence, and the server had disappeared. And then
shades of Hillary,
And then he goes and sneaks into the House office buildings at midnight after he's been banned, and he steals Debbie Wasserman Schultz's laptop and plants it in a phone booth. And it's assigned to a prosecutor in the office where Wasserman Schultz's brother works. And then she's on video threatening the Capitol Police to disband the entire Capitol Police board unless they give back the evidence that they need to prosecute a hacker. And so when you think this happened a week after the DNC was hacked, that Wasserman Schultz's own IT guy was caught in a separate hack. Why would she stand up for him? Why would she protect him? Why would she try to block the police's investigation? It just defies belief. It just simply cannot be that there's any, innocuous explanation for that. And so I think there was a lot of speculation. Does this mean he also hacked the DNC too? And I shied away from that in my reporting because I believed at that time that Democrats truly did care about cybersecurity because it was all they were talking about with Russia. Right. And so I just wanted to really play it straight and to the middle and say, look, here's this hacking thing. Everyone on Capitol Hill on the inside knows it happened. It's documented. Mm-hmm. Are you guys going to do something? And I felt like if I talked about the DNC, then they would say, oh, now it's partisan. But that's what everyone wants to know. And sure enough, Imran Awan did go to the DNC building all the time, like every day, and he wasn't on the payroll. So who knows? He may have had something to do with that. But that's not the central thesis of the book. What happened is in the book is there's no speculation. It's 100% proven. Right. And you see the kind of things that the Capitol Police knew happened, the FBI knew happened, Nancy Pelosi knew happened. And then this guy gets an immunity deal from the police. And to get back to your question about this minor charge, yeah. So everything that we talked about they're investigating it. All this stuff happened. The FBI and the Capitol Police, they know what's going on. And he tries to flee the country with a couple $100,000 that he scams out of some banks. And so they arrest him at the airport. He's got a briefcase of $10,000 of cash in it. But they only charge him with basically like financial crimes related to fleeing. And so they charge him with the cover up, but not the crime.
Right.
And then the media tries to make it seem like the whole thing was about this minor financial matter when the timing doesn't work. I mean, the investigation had begun before the financial crime even happened. It was very clear that this was part of fleeing an investigation.
Right. Wow. Well, we're out of time, but again, obstruction of justice: how the deep state risked national security to protect the Democrats. Just phenomenal work, Luke. By Luke Rosiak, by the way. Just terrific. Congratulations on the book, and I hope every adult American reads this to get a sense of the level of corruption, the nest of corruption that is the Congress. This is not just Democrats, as you point out. This is Paul Ryan, who is part of the cover-up of this whole thing. Because, as you say, the Democrats were afraid the Awans would release embarrassing, damaging emails. The Republicans were afraid they'd be exposed as morons, as you put it. Thank you all for joining us very much. Joining us for the program today. We hope you go to Judicial Watch's website, www.judicialwatch.org, and donate if you like our work. And we'll keep bringing you other great guests like Luke Rosiak in the future. Thank you.